Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to another live stream covering World Creator 2022. I hope all you guys are having a good evening today. We're going to touch a little bit on some interesting effects with terraces, and I know been some people that have asked me exactly what's the difference between Terrace Simple and Terrace Steep, and we're going to go over that. We're also going to go over some different effects that we could use Terrace because the Terrace filters are not quite where I would like them to be, but they're getting in the direction. You can do some pretty cool things with them already. Let's dive into these particular filters. The first one is we're going to go with the simplest one first. So it's literally terraced and simple. And, this one is, as seems, it is very, very simple. The terrace size just increases the amount of terrace effect. And though I wish that there was also an option here that lets you choose one terrace or a single terrace, but I'm going to show you here in a minute how we can do that. Terrace offset is sort of changing the procedural aspect to it. So if I lower this size a little bit, the terrace offset is kind of sort of the procedural generation that's driving where the terrace is. And it's just offsetting that some. It's sort of so subtle, it doesn't seem like it should really be there. I think this terrace offset should really be called height offset and should be a little bit more drastic, and that way we can push up and down vertically these terraced effect. The next thing next to terrace offset is this strength multiplier. It's really just how strong the effect is in terms of how much terrace it is. So if I were to say, let's pump this up, we could have we can have something close to Minecraft, or we can have something that is close to terrain. Now, terrain, if I have the strength multiplier up really high, then we're going to get really small terraced effects. And let me actually change this to 0.5 meter. There we go. That may influence. So it's really just the strength multiplier should just be the general strength of there is this general strength of effect, but it's sort of an additional strength on top of general strength here. Yeah, this is essentially like that. So if you know of anything that you're walking on a terrain inside of FPS shooter, like take Tarkov, for example, we could totally go through the process of recreating a Tarkov map or a landscape, because I guarantee you Tarkov, I don't believe used World Creator. I believe they used built-in Unity tools for that, which World Creator originally started as a Unity tool. Its roots were Unity, so at least they I guess they could have done that. So let me go ahead and show how we could just do a single. Let's do this one all the way up. I don't like the Terrace Simple so much because it applies too many terraces. But if we liked, for example, a certain terrace at a certain height, we could obviously add the height distribution rule. And we can control where we want this effect to take place. Now, if you see this little weird thing here, if you didn't like that, we could always blur the edge, because right now you see the height is in this region. But if I blur it down a little bit, let's just blur it entirely. So the blur, add a little bit of blur like that. There we go. So now we are basically, let me lower this multiplier. Sorry, let me increase the multiplier, reduce the strength. So now we have one terrace that we like. So we could do multiple of these. And let's say we like this height of this next one to be up somewhere around here. So this is one way that you can add variation, because the terrace simple is a bit too even, so to speak. And if you didn't want it to be even, just add multiple terraces like I'm doing now, and then add different height distributions. Or another thing that you can do is, instead of adding multiple terraces, you could duplicate the height filter here, make sure it's on multiply, or sorry, make sure it's on add. And then since it's on the add operation, we can change the height of this particular rule to be up a little higher. And now we can make our very own irregular terrace. So we are driving the same terrace definitions, and we're banking it irregular on our own. And of course, if you don't like how something is, there's a lot of settings that we can go about and make, but we can change where this. See, you may not want this particular terrace face to go all the way over to the right. Well, that's okay. There's many other ways that we can go about distributing these entirely. One of which is, where is it? Mask. Create a mask, subtract, and then maybe we subtract this area right here. Maybe that's a bit too sharp. Let me fill that back in. Brush smoothness. There we go. And now we're just bleeding these edges. Maybe we don't like this one, but we like this one over here. So let's just remove it. Or maybe this one looks a little bit too stair-stepped. Maybe we cut through here. So now we're just designing. We're basically just going through and shaping these terraces how we want. And if I were to stop edit, and now we have sort of a custom, like this is really nice. I can choose that I want this to be terraced up and this one to be smooth just by adding a few simple rules. And we haven't actually talked about these rules a whole lot. Before, if I wanted to duplicate an effect, I would just duplicate the terrace filter and then have that particular effect on its own. But I keep failing to remember to tell you guys that you can easily just add more rules, and as long as you add information then instead of multiply, because multiply is only going to appear, affect the areas that were already affected. But by adding, I am adding new areas that are being applied on top of it. If I wanted to say, all right, we can do the max of this, we can have a min operation, which is crazy for that one. We can multiply, which will only add it within the bounds of another multiply, or subtract. So this one, this particular height field here is subtracting information from these top two. And this one is adding information on top of those two. And this one is adding the last information. We don't want that. We want that one to stay add so that we can affect the entire area. Now, I think even without you, say, playing the new Battlefield, you could look at the map designs and see why they suck. With Battlefield, those designs have a lot to do with, I would say it's not so much the design of the actual terrain and landscape as it is the design of the map style for the game itself. Like the the player structure within the map. I think in Battlefield and Call of Duty, the terrain design by itself looks really good. It's just the sort of man-made elements on where they decide to put buildings, where they decide to put flags or road structures. All that stuff is really tailored for the gaming experience. And unfortunately for the landscape, those sort of decisions of where to force players to go or to draw players to could make or break the game. A really good game. Like I really love Battlefield 4. It's one of my favorite Battlefield games, as well as Battlefield Bad Company 2. I think the maps of those two games are really good. But you know, some areas do have their flaws, and some of them work out fine. All right, so moving on, the Terrace simple, that is pretty much the majority of the settings that you can play with on it. Now, of course, we could say if, for example, let me hide this and add another Terrace simple. Let's say, for example, I wanted the Terrace to only affect certain amounts of detail. And thank you, Malwarebytes. All right, remember, we always have the level strength sliders here. And though, let's say if we reduce these all the way to the bottom, if I can grab them, and your level strength makes a big difference on how it's determined across the terrain. If I just increase level step 7, well, that's not going to do much. Let's see. This is adding terrace variation that is quite nice without it appearing like it's too terracey. If I go up to 9, you can start seeing it coming in. Just straight 12 is going to get that really sharp edge. But somewhere around 9 is fine. Maybe half of 10. Let's remove 10. So at this, let's see. I'll just put that there. I know I'm rambling. But if we just have these sort of lower level details only affect the terrain just a smidge, and then we add another interesting effect like the Canyon Hard, we don't notice that this has terrace to it, but it does help shape what the corresponding filters are going to do. If I were to remove this, you see it does shape a little bit of it. Let me reduce this effect or increase that. That effect is pretty strong. Let's try something else that kind of cuts the terrain a bit more. How about let's see. That one's pretty interesting. Wide flows is fine. All right, this is a really good example. So wide flows is a really good filter, but adding terrace, we see we add pieces there, so we can increase the strength. Sorry, I decreased the strength, so now let's increase the strength. You see it's terracing over here, but it doesn't feel so much like we're making the terrace effect feel irregular by not doing these high level. If I were to increase level step 12, it's very obvious how much terracey it looks. But by just reducing some of these and having the terrace only applied to add additional information for this particular erosion flow to cut into, then it helps break up that terrace effect. Additionally, let's add something else. Let's add talus, and I love the talus filter in combination with terraces, and we're going to do that and then the next filter. But let's see, let's make the angle super sharp, the length really low, and let's say the max height. Let's reduce this pretty well. There we go. So it's kind of cool. And we can even take it another step further. Let's add another erosion here and reduce that strength. So it's just, I think that particular one cuts down a bit too much. There we go. So this canyon filter is kind of nice. So it takes and fills in the crevices of our, or sort of gaps between terrace. And this is terraced, but it doesn't feel so much like it's terraced because we're breaking it up, and it's just simply using the lower features or the lower details of that filter. Okay, specifically with them really trying to have 124 players on a map. Yeah, I think the player cap on certain maps is really dependent on the map size. Take one of my absolute favorite games is Hell Let Loose, and I've streamed a lot of Hell Let Loose on here in the past. And those are really big maps, but they're locked to, 100 players? I think it's 100 players, and it feels right because those maps are 8 kilometers, squared. They're huge maps, and people are spread out, and it feels right. But when you're trying to take 124 players and crunch them on a 2-kilometer little block, it can be a bit chaotic. It becomes a bullet fest and less of a strategy. So this is just one avenue that we could take with using the Terrace simple. There's many ways we can go about doing this. If I even add the one that we did before, I kind of like that, where we add a little bit of a sharp terrace in there. This effect I'm really digging. That combination between a simple terrace and the talus filter. Even though it's, you do see some landscapes like this around the world that have a very similar terrace height to it. But I do feel like there should be another terrace option for irregularity. And we could, I'm going to do that. We could also adjust the terrace simply by adding some distortion to it. And so that's going to be the next sort of effect that I showcase. Let me save this, because if you guys want this terrain, I will go ahead and save it for you. Save, and we'll do folder. We'll just do this tests. And we'll call it that. And then I'll share that with you guys so you can kind of play around with this particular map, just to kind of see how some of the pieces are doing. Also, I will show, let me go back to the home here. Let me open up this one. This project that I'm opening is one that I kind of teased before, and it is also using only the simple terrace and the talus filter. Don't worry, I'm listening to. Just have 7 tabs up for the boys. I got you. It's no worries. So this one appears a little bit regular, but I am saving sort of the explanation of some of this for a special stream in a couple weeks, where we're going to recreate a certain segment of the Faroe Islands just north of England and southeast of Iceland. There's a very, very cool sort of rock formations that form these very particular shapes. Your voice is really soothing. Well, thank you very much. I found that my voice is very noticeable on some of the other content that I do, like for Quixel. People will call me out saying, "Is this Tyler?" So I have learned that even though no one has really seen my face aside from some of my VODs, my Twitch VODs, my voice is apparently recognizable. So yeah, this particular terrain is in inspiration of the Faroe Islands in that terraced effect. And even though it's pretty even, it is kind of broken up by the fluid structure here. And we're going to get into some of this in a couple weeks where we design that shape. So let's go on to the next type of Terrace filter, and that is going to be Terrace Sharp. But before I do, I'm going to do this pesky little soil thing and drop that, increase that. I should be able to save this as a standard for myself. Okay, so this is a typical landscape, and we're going to do a 1/4 meter again is fine. All right, so now this time, let's add the Terrace Steep. Now you'll notice that the Terrace Steep has a few different extra features that we can apply. It has a thing called a height range, which is interesting. It also has a number of terraces, has steepness, intensity of that steepness, a top fall off, and a rotate X and rotate Y, which this Y should be a Z or a Z, whichever part of the world you're from. It should not be Y, but some programs, the vertical axis is Y, and like 90% of other programs, the vertical axis is Z or Z, which is that'll be changed, so don't worry about that. So how do we understand these? So this height range is the range of the generation. It's not the range of, which I was hoping it would be the range of where these terraces appear, because if we lower these to something really tiny and move them around, it's not really going to change a whole lot. It's just sort of adjusting, not really making a whole lot of adjustments here yet of the calculated height range. It's odd. I think that still has some work to do. And of course, I'm working on a World Creator version that none of you have, unfortunately. It's sort of a staging one before the final product comes out. All right, so just like the Terrace Simple, we can adjust the number of terraces. We can even go really low to having a single terrace, one single jump, or we can have 2 jumps or 3 jumps or 4 jumps. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, if it's over 4, it applies more than 4. It's weird. So this is the number that we can apply on number of terraces. Steepness is quite literally how intense this height factor, or how sharp that height factor is. If we lower this all the way to the ground, or all the way to 0, you see it does nothing. If we increase the steepness all the way to the top, it makes these as sharp as it could in this particular case, practically vertical. So you can adjust sort of the angle. Think of this as the angle of the terrace fall off. We can make it subtle like this, or we can make it pretty steep. The intensity, again, is that intensity factor that's sort of applying on top of the strength. So for example, if my steepness was fully steep, I can increase the intensity of this all the way up, and it looks pretty sharp. All right, so this is a good example. Actually, let me lower the intensity just a smidge, about halfway. Okay, so top fall off is basically how well this is rolled up. So let me show you. If I were to decrease this, you see it's made it the rectangle of this terrace a little sharp. If I increase this, you see how it's sort of taking from the very top of this terrace to the bottom cliff of the next terrace. It's sort of rolled it off. It's sort of loosened the intensity of it. If I were to take the intensity down somewhere around, let's say 15%, and I lower this fall off, you see how it's adjusting sort of the angle of the flat area of the terrace. So really this top fall off could be also renamed of terrace angle in a way. So the steepness affects everything as well. If I were to say 50% steepness, intensity around 30%. And I made the fall off 100%. Let's see, let's roll this. We can have sort of a rolling effect instead of it being super sharp. Now, the next two are probably some of the wildest critical pieces. Let me try to get a little bit more. Let me go down to just a couple terraces here. All right. And I'll reduce the fall off entirely so that we can see this happening in real time. All right, so rotate X and rotate Z is really what it should be. So rotate Z, Y or Z will take the terrace and rotate it around a vertical axis. So you're adjusting the angle of where this is. You can't see anything now because the rotate X, which is the angle in addition to the plane, is set to 0 degrees. So let's take this rotate X and increase it to 45%. Somewhere around there. And I'm going to lower the terraces so that you can see fully what's happening. All right, so let's increase the intensity. Let's see the steepness. All right, this is where it gets crazy. So let's increase the steepness and lower the intensity to around 50%. I don't think fall off does a whole lot here. It does a little bit. And see, that still doesn't do a whole lot. All right, this is pretty drastic, but I was wanting to do this on purpose to kind of show you why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. All right, so rotate X basically takes the terrace and rotates it along the X axis, the entire thing, and kind of angles it. So right now it's angling at 40, let's say 45 degrees. Before, if you see in real time, it's nowhere, but I am now angling it. Sorry, that's intensity. I held the wrong one. All right, so we're gonna angle this back down to 0. So this is what it kind of looks like around 0. And you can see how sort of the terrain is rotating based on this rotate X. And see, all right, so this is a good example. So now rotate Y is gonna take this and rotate it across the vertical axis. So it's changing the orientation of where the degrees are being positioned. So by doing this, we could actually, even though this is a really drastic example, we can basically take this rotation and sort of add striations to a hillside. So let's see, let's do the steepness and intensity right here. And I'm also going to create dunes this way as well. So let's say we have this, but we want these to only be applied to the higher ranges of slope. So I'm going to add a distribution, slope, and I'm going to add it based on the upper portions of a slope. So right here, we've got a terrain. This is the base terrain here. And if I want to add it to the upper portions of a slope, that's pretty drastic. Let me blur this a little bit. All right, that's blurred. Actually, I know what I want to do. Let's let's do a single terrace here. All right, single terrace, and we're just going to isolate. Now this is going to be pretty cool here. So let's do add distribution and cavity, convex, step size, and let's say, well, let's not do cavity. Let's just do a mask. Say we want that effect to happen just around right here. And then maybe we want to add it right here as well. Ooh, that's a bit sharp. Maybe I don't want it right there. Maybe now let's do, I'm going to try and make this understood a little bit better. Now it's like a landslide. Yes. So it's not quite, actually, before we do this terrace steep effect, I am going to talk about, we're going to skip ahead and go to another filter that actually does some pretty interesting things to the entire landscape. One of which is creating a pretty interesting sort of, just like the Monument Valley in a way. So we're going to use the curve filter. The curve filter is very interesting. There's a whole lot more left that I wish could happen with the curve filter, but we could basically change the generation drastically. We could, we could apply, make little pockets of mounds like this. We could, if we wanted to rotate this spline this way and have this one come up and have it sort of a smooth hill shape here, we can do sort of some interesting rolling hill fall offs. Or we can also make it a little bit more tapered. But what I'm going to do to get this interesting effect is I'm going to flatten this side. And I'm going to flatten this side too. I keep it sort of like this weird spline. All right, so something like this. Let me increase this up a little bit. Now, let's lower this. Let me try. Let me try doing this, and then we shall add a zero edge filter to kind of cut the edge. And we can have a single little piece here. And the curve filter pretty much just let us do this. And it's only because I have that spline here cut right in the middle. If I were to taper this some, we could taper it. We're basically just tapering the edge. So you could do a lot of things. If I want it really sharp, you can see I'm creating this really sharp curve right here. Maybe I want it to be a little bit. Maybe we can get a little fancy. Do something like this. All right, so now if we add the terrace steep effect, but actually let's change. Let's say it's 45 degrees. You see how it's sort of cutting diagonally into this this hillside here. So if that is just one way we can go about doing this. Let's see, if we increase the number, it kind of looks weird. I think there needs to be more control with this terrace thing, but look, it's pretty interesting. We can maybe right there is fine. We can adjust the intensity. Let's say the steepness. It's a pretty neat effect, but it needs more attention. And so let's do this, and then let's tailor it to just the really strict parts, or the really slopey parts of the terrain. So it's really weird there. Let me lower the higher values here and just affect the lower values. Crank this intensity up. I can see devs using this for like real-time strategy games like Age of Empires and Total War games. Oh, absolutely. You can do lots of stuff. Absolutely. And let's say I'm just testing out different filters because I did have a terrain that worked out pretty well with this sort of pipeline. You can see the terrace is acting, it's not doing striations as much as I want. It's not quite getting that intensity look that I really need. That one's not too bad. All right, so let's just assume that's what we're rolling with. All right, then let's go ahead and add another terrace here. We can even do the steep again and maybe do just a couple big ones. And then what we'll do this time is let's just lower this down. Maybe we have the fall off. Let's make it pretty steep. Where's this at? One thing that I like, we're doing this on purpose. I'm making this pretty steep on purpose. Let's see. That's pretty. Let's do that. And then let's add the talus filter. So the talus filter is going to definitely add some variation to our terrace here, but let's change the angle to be pretty steep, and the length is fine. Let's lower this some. There we go. we can add all sorts of different variations to this. Actually, that one's not too bad. And then for the talus, we could just make it a bit variations here. Strength. That is an interesting version. And now here is one finished unique ice mountain. I must make 30 more now. Yeah, this is sort of not the version that I was intending. But let me now go to... So you can kind of see you can do multiple different things basically with the Terrace steep. I mean, it's just... You can angle it. You can choose a regularity on it. But let me start from ground zero. And then if you want to add more variation to a terrace, because it is kind of pretty uniform, we can say, all right, we want you have to think about the distribution rules. We want this particular terrace, no matter how smooth it is, if it's angled any. Well, this angle is still acting a little weird. Let's just say we don't want the terrace to be in certain particular locations. Like we could add the cavity and say, all right, anywhere that's concave, and maybe that concave step size is really big. And the strength, let's say. So that's a lot of concave areas, and we can blur that concave area just a little bit. And let's say we didn't want terrace anywhere except where this concave nature is. So the terrace is only going to appear where the concave is. And you can do multiple variations of this, multiple stacking effects of terrace to get different irregularities. If you want, say, height, add. Just like we did before, say I want this entire top piece here to be a terrace. We can have the entire top piece be a terrace, but say we don't like how this top piece is entirely. So let's add, let's add, where's the rocks to it. And say we could subtract rocks. So everywhere now that it's being seen is being subtracted, and it's adding more variation. Let's see, let's multiply. Let's multiply it from the height. So if I were to instead, right now, how it's 1, 2, 3, these distribution rules are all stacked on top of each other. If I take this rock distribution and plug it inside of height, now this rock distribution will only be applied within the bounds of this height range. So you can see it's only within the bounds here, but it is multiply. Let's see what add does. Sometimes it's a little buggy when I do that. Yeah. Multiply. There we go. Oh, I did it wrong. So add, there we go. So add, multiply, it's in reverse now. So now it's adding it. Let's do add, then multiply within that. All right, so that's a bug. That shouldn't happen that way. But you get the idea. Just adding variation. Even this height, if I were to say that this height is going to be distorted some, you see it's distorting the edge of the height bounds there. It will see it's removed that distribution rule right here. Yay, what's up, Yimmy? Do the controls have a lower sensitivity mode? Seems hard to make small changes. Yeah, the controls definitely don't have a lower sensitivity mode. They are very, very drastic. That is for sure. And I think that is just another one of those aspects that they are going to be changing. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be in the next update or when. I hope it's going to be in the next update. But you should be able to, like, if I wanted to type in what's the upper bounds of this one is let's see, the upper bounds of this one is 100. It'd be nice if you can type in, say, 200. So you can type in 200. Let's see how. Let's see. Let's take the steepness here and put it at 50 and the intensity at 100. So now let's go in here in this one. If I can click. All right. Type 200. Did that change much? See, it's red, but it's not any different than 100. So I think there should be an overpower setting if I can type in whatever value I want, but it most definitely is a little bit finicky. Hi, how's it going, Yemi? Good to see ya. Learning map design. Yeah, it's intriguing. I've done some Blender. I was curious similar it was. Yeah, I am actually, I don't know if it's next week or in a couple weeks, but I am going to design something in here and we're going to export it to Blender and go through all of those processes. Absolutely. Let's see. I want to now try and do something a little different. I want to try and showcase the sort of dune effect that I did. All right, well, now let's do terrace and steep. All right, so say I have steepness, roll off is nothing. Maybe this curve filter is not. Yeah, let's lower it. All right, so say we have this, and this looks pretty crazy. Here we go. We can see this a little better. So this looks obviously pretty crazy. And it's not bad. Let me see if I can. I don't like that. All right, let's just do this. All right, so we have this we have this crazy shard look here. Now, say we have this and we want to affect it a little bit more. So with distribution, with another filter called, drum roll please, distortion. All right, let's say this. Yeah, so with distortion, look, we can, that's not necessarily. There we go. I wanted the terrace to not affect the higher details here. I want it to affect the lower details. That was my trick. So intensity here and distortion adds a little bit of variation. Let's do a 1/4 meter. Let's do a 1/4 meter and let's hide that for now. All right, distortion length. All right, so we have our steep terrace here. hypothetically a steep terrace. All right, so distortion can obviously change it up some too. So we're going to change it just a smidge. And then I'm going to, let's see if I can get this to look right. Yeah, we can do Terrace and then so basically what I'm trying to do is kind of create some more dunes using the terraced steep. Let's get rid of that. And I did this pretty well earlier. Direction. There we go. Now we're kind of getting a little bit. So this is kind of dunes on a grand scale here. Obviously, this effect should be twice as big, like twice the scale, but you kind of can start seeing when we add all this stuff together. I don't think Terrace is doing much here. Oh, it is doing some stuff. So just by, I mean, it's crazy. Just by, let's see, where's my terrace again here? There we go. We can add, nope, that effect is too much. So we're adding just even more dunes. It is kind of crazy, and I can rotate it if I don't like how it looks. So we're going to have a better dune experience in another video, but this is sort of a procedural thing that we could do. Maybe I think the Terrace filter here. Oh yeah, that's pretty nifty. There, I think a little bit lower. A little bit lower is a much better justice. There we go. So it's looking a little bit better. So it's, you can do a whole lot of things with the Terrace filter, or sorry, the Terrace filter, whether it's, you know, making these crazy shapes, or let's actually end it off with a border blend. Let's see. Well, the border blend did not work there. Oh, there we go. Let's do 11. No. You get the idea there. Oh, and we can we can top it all off. Nope, that one doesn't look good. There's a lot happening here. There's a lot of simulations going on. I don't think Canyon did much. And I'm going to remove border blend. So we are going to end it with that. And I do believe we could dive into so much more of the Terrace effect. And I want to try and find the one that I had before. I don't think I saved the test project that I had before in my test zone. No, I didn't save it. Or did I? If you have any questions, feel free to ask because I'm just going to try and see if I can find the test example that I worked on earlier for the stream that turned out pretty well, because 9 times out of 10 what I do, oh no, I didn't. 9 times out of 10 what I do off stream turns out weirdly enough better than what I do on stream. So yeah, I'm intrigued. Yep. Blender, learning map design. Yes, exciting. First time chat viewer. Oh, Yemi. I thought you've been in this chat before. It says you're a first time chat viewer. That's kind of wild. Let's. I mean, that's kind of a cool variation. Nope, I think I followed your YouTube, didn't know you streamed here. Yeah, I stream. So I stream every single Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm trying to stick to that schedule. And then by this Friday, this particular stream that we're covering right now will be available to Patreon subscribers for about 9 days or so. And then the following, let's see, it'll be a week from this upcoming Monday. So 2 weeks from today, this particular stream will go to YouTube. If you wanted to see it earlier, then you can subscribe to the Patreon channel and get it this upcoming Friday. Sometimes I get it in by Wednesday. Sometimes it's Thursday, but typically I schedule it to for sure be available by Friday. Too many controls can spend days creating a terrain. I know we could totally spend so much time creating a terrain, and that's not even counting, textures. I mean, that's the same thing with textures here. I mean, I could do the same thing with slope. And it's also interesting. So if I wanted to add some rocks to this whole thing, there should be, rocky. I think it's rocky. Nope. There's a lot happening right now that's kind of removing this effect. Yeah, because these erosions are kind of smoothing out way too much. Yeah, let's do that. That's kind of interesting. And we'll say that this particular thing, slope and the higher slopes. Let's reduce the talus filter a lot. So this slope is just the higher numbers. So it should be, yep, right there. And it's still adding way too much. What is adding our sedimentation? Holy smokes, that's crazy. We're getting pretty wild here. Let's just add that back and yeah. All I could say is, yeah, but we've added some effects that have kind of messed up our process a little bit more than I wanted to. It's kind of a majestic landscape at this point. So, um, yeah, we could totally spend hours and hours and hours sort of setting this up, but um, I'm going to try and make next week's stream cover this topic. I'm going to try to create something from, let's try to create the area of the Faroe Islands that I'm kind of really intrigued by. We'll create it in World Creator. We'll texture it in World Creator, and then we'll go through the process of exporting everything out to Blender. Finally, we can showcase some stuff with World Creator and Blender. So if you're interested in seeing the process from World Creator to Blender, then join me next week at the same time, and I will be very happy to have you here. So without further ado, I'll leave the floor open for just a couple more questions if you have any, and then I will call it quits for tonight because we have gone a little over stream because I try to keep it to an hour, but typically we run to about an hour and 15 minutes, which is perfectly fine. I try to keep it around the same time period so that's not too strenuous for people to watch later, because sometimes these long streams, especially whenever you cut them down for YouTube later, can be a little long, and I try not to trail off of our given topic. But given topic tonight was the two different Terrace effects and the curve effect, and there used to be a roughness filter that allowed us to do some pretty cool Terrace effects in a sort of a irregular fashion, but that no longer exists. Super happy to meet you, Mr. Team O. I thank you very much. And you'll probably see me tomorrow morning in Deadly's chat. I am there every day, and I'm usually lurking because I work at the same time. So yeah, I'm really glad you guys stopped by. Thanks again, everyone, for the subscriptions. Very much appreciate that. And without further ado, I will see you guys next week.